Tonight on Deck Doctors, we're helping Michael build a vampire deck that doesn't suck.
Thanks for watching the video. Now, if you want to make sure you don't miss out on any of the other awesome Magic the Gathering content that we create, then make sure you click subscribe so you'll be updated whenever we release a new video.
So tonight, Dr. Aria is out sick, so we have brought in Dr. Morgan to prevent cross-infection.
Dr. Morgan here. I'm a sponsored player here at Pat's Games in Austin, Texas, one of the best card shops here in the Southwest. Pat's Games. That's right, filling in for Aria, who's a bit sick, a little bit ironic for a doctor, wouldn't you say?
I would say.
So today, Kevin, who are we helping out? What's the patient? What's the prognosis?
Tonight's letter comes from Michael in South Bend, Indiana. Michael writes, "Dear Deck Doctors, I need help with a vampire token deck. I basically designed around Elenda the Dusk Rose. Basically, I'm trying to create a horde of tiny vampire tokens that can pump your life and pump Elenda. The main problem I seem to have is buffing up Elenda. She never drops fast enough. Should I add more copies of her, since I have Mirror Gallery? The deck doesn't need to be standard legal, but I'd like to keep it under $150 and stick to the black-white vampire theme. Thanks, Michael." So, Dr. Morgan, what have we got on the operating table?
Well, let's take a look. So the creature suite, there are about 27 creatures. As you mentioned, only one Elenda the Dusk Rose. He's got 2 Bishop of the Bloodstained, 4 Bishop Soldier, 4 Famished Paladin, 4 Legion Conquistador, 4 Legion Lieutenant, 3 Maverin Fane Dusk Apostle, 4 Sanctum Seeker, and 1 Vona, Butcher of Magan. If we move on to the sorceries in the list, we've got 3 Call to the Feast, 3 Queen's Commission. Artifacts, we've got 2 Mirror Gallery, the one he mentioned, kind of a spicy include, if I do say so myself, and then 1 Vanquisher's Banner. And then finally, rounding out the deck, we have 20 lands, Isolated Chapel, 8 plains, and 8 swamps.
First thing I'm going to say is that if you want to build your deck around Elenda the Dusk Rose, you probably need a few more copies of Elenda the Dusk Rose. And I don't even think you need these mirror galleries, right?
No, especially because the only legend that there are multiple copies of outside of Legion's Landing is Maverin Fane, which comes down at 3. And the thing about those low-cost legends that produce a lot of board presence is they usually get removed by your opponent pretty quickly. So having 3 copies doesn't mean you really need a mirror gallery. It just means that you want to see one again when someone kills it.
Right. So let's take out the mirror gallery, make a bit of space right off the bat, and let's go up to 3 Elendas.
I like that.
I think we don't actually need as many Maverin Fanes. They're okay, but I want to start clearing out some of the 2 and 3 cost vampires to make space for more powerful vampires. One of the things I noticed first about this list is the quality of the creatures in here are not great. There's some of the more recent vampires that aren't that powerful, but if you're not locked into standard legal, there's loads of great common and uncommon and even a couple of cheap rare vampires. From the last couple of times they printed vampire sets, you can really up the power level of the monsters in your deck, keeping the vampire theme just by swapping out for different commons and uncommons.
So what are some of the cards that you liked in Michael's list that we are going to keep in that slot? And then what are some of the cheaper vampires that you thought were better that we brought in alongside them?
Well, Legion's Lieutenant is obviously great in a vampire deck that's creating lots of vampire tokens. So we're going to keep all 4 of those.
Lording them up, you know, getting them bigger.
Yep. Legion's Landing is obviously fantastic. He wants to keep 4 of those, and that's just a really powerful standard card anyway.
Definitely, and 4 of them is fine because usually they flip into a land anyway, and you want to play another one, get another token.
The Call to the Feasts, I think, are absolutely fine. Creating 3 tokens for 4 mana. We've all got lifelink, and it's a lot of tokens.
Especially if you've got one of your lords out, right?
Yeah. And the legends. Let's keep 1 of all the legends and go up to 3 of Elenda, and that gives you a good base to build around. And then let's just upgrade the rank and file to give us something a little bit stronger to build around.
I like the sound of that. You got me excited thinking about those vampires too, because I've been playing for a while and there certainly are just a host of options in that particular tribe. So I'm sure
of options.
Oh, I didn't even realize it.
So in the 2 mana slot, you've got a couple of options. There's one I was quite tempted by with Extort, and that's something I'd do if I was doing a lot of the life gain, life loss triggers. But for this deck, I've gone for Martyr of Dusk. It's a 2/1 for 2 mana, replacing your 2/2 lifelinker for 2 mana. When it dies, it's going to give you a 1/1 lifelinker. So you're still getting some lifelink. You're also getting better redundancy. If you run to board wipe or you have to trade it off, you're still going to have something on the table for that. And for anything that's dying and triggering Elandra, it's like an extra trigger for that card.
Oh wow, I hadn't even thought of that, sort of building into the synergy of Elandra.
Exactly. In the 3 mana slot, I want some captivating vampires.
I've got to hear more about this.
This is another vampire lord, so now you're going up to 8 vampires to give you vampires +1/+1. This one's also got tap 5 untapped vampires, gain control of target creature, and turn it into a vampire. It is a super flavorful vampire. It is exactly what a vampire does in the movies. He dominates his enemies and brings them into the vampire cult, and also just boosts up all those tokens nice and strong, an extra +1/+1 across.
The more you steal your opponent's things and they become vampires, the more
bigger they get.
You can tap them and get more things. That's great.
It's just really good. We're also going to stick in 4 vampire Nighthawks. If you haven't run into this guy before, it's standard played, right? Played
Oh,
in standard?
absolutely. Yeah, it was played all over the place in standard and all over the place in draft too when it's in for draft format.
It's just a very powerful creature. 2/3 flying for 3 mana. It's got lifelink and death touch. So it's really hard to race with that 4-point life swing every turn. It's got evasion, and it can block and kill pretty much anything between flying and death touch. Another thing I noticed about this deck, it doesn't have a lot of ways to deal with your opponent's creatures. If your opponent drops something huge you can't really deal with, these Nighthawks are going to give you something that can just sit there and they can't attack into it without dying.
Absolutely.
Further on that theme, you really need some kind of removal, because if your opponent drops a nasty artifact or enchantment that stops you attacking or just hoses vampires or something, you are just going to have a really nasty day. So I'm going to stick in, I mean, you could go up to 3 or 4. I'm going to say at least 2 cast out. It's just a 4 mana enchantment unless you exile anything. And it's your catch-all answer to whichever nasty creatures can't attack effect, or
planeswalkers, anything that hits and that you don't want to see on the board, really. Another thing I love about it is that it can cycle for 1 mana. So if you're in the groove of playing a bunch of vampires and hitting in turn after turn and you don't want to take the tempo down, and you can cycle that card away and get something else.
Exactly. Finally, I'm going to add some lands to this deck. You're currently running 20. I know your Legion's Landing can flip into a land, but by the time it can do that, it might be a little bit late to get you out of your early game mana problems. I would say run at least 24. You can add a couple of Concealed Courtyard fairly cheaply, stick in an extra Swamp and a Plains. You're up to 24, your draws are going to be a lot smoother. You've got creatures going all the way up to 5 mana here, and you want to hit at least your first 4 land drops very consistently. 24 lands are going to put you in good stead to do that every single time.
Absolutely. It's a good rule of thumb for mid-range sort of value creature decks to stick around 24, 25 lands. For sort of aggressive tempo aggro sort of decks, you're generally okay between 22 and 23, and then for the fastest, most pedal to the metal sort of decks, that's when you can go down to 18, 19, 20 lands, but you really do have to top out at 3 converted mana costs for those sorts of decks for that sort of land count to be effective. Now there's one other question I have for you, because in a deck like this where I'm constantly playing creatures and building my board, sometimes I can find that I get to a point where I've just played out all my things, and I just want more things in my hand. You know, I just want more vampires. I want to keep the hordes coming, if you will. Is there any vampire that we can add to sort of get some card advantage, sort of draw some cards for us?
There certainly is. There is the Champion of Dusk, and I think we should swap out your 5 mana Drain Vampire for this guy. He's a 5 mana pay life and draw vampire. 5 mana 4/4. He will hit you for 1 for every vampire you've got, but you will draw that many cards.
Ooh.
Now you've got a couple of life gain triggers, a couple of lifelink things still in here, so I think you can afford to take a hit at some point. But taking 5 damage, drawing 5 cards, absolutely worth it.
So worth it
in many matchups. Just 2 of these, because you could go up to 3 if you really wanted. You wouldn't want 4 because you don't want multiples, especially early on. And once you hit 1, it's going to refresh your hand, and you're going to be good for a while after that. But that's going to give you some really nice redundancy. 2 extra little things we're going to throw in here as well. A pair of Bloodline Keepers. This is a little pricier, but the whole deck is still under the 150 price point you were looking for. This guy not only taps to create 2/2 flying vampires, 3/3 flying vampires.
You don't just taps. You don't have to pay anything for it.
You just tap. Just tap. It's a 2/2 flying vampire.
Sign me up for that.
3/3 flying vampire all by itself, and if you've got 5 or more vampires, will transform into lineage something.
That sounds about right.
Some enormous, horrific vampire godlord that is 5/5 flying, gives all your vampires +2/+2.
Good lord.
Allowed just the most devastating
Very
swing
good lord,
you could.
yeah, absolutely.
Good, good lord, I like it. And I've also slipped in a couple of indulgent aristocrats. We're a bit short on 1-drops in this deck, so it gives you a couple of extra things to put on the board early on. 1/1 lifelinker is not terrible, but it has a sacrifice ability, so pay 2, sacrifice a creature, give all vampires you control +1/+1. This is going to be great with the token generation because, I don't know, instead of this guy, random vampire, and 3 Call to the Feast tokens, sack off one of those, and everything else is then just crusaded up, +1/+1 up, and is much more of a threat. Makes your opponent's blocking decisions a lot more difficult. Send in your creatures, sack the one he blocks, everything else gets bigger, and also gives you a trigger to set off your Elandra. And maybe even later in the game, you find yourself with a situation where you're like, I don't know, sacrifice something, power up Elandra, sacrifice Elandra, get a bunch of tokens, untap, sacrifice 2 more to give those another +2/+2, and attack for 30, 40 damage. Loads of fun.
Man, I am, honestly, it sounds really fun to play with this deck. If I wanted to pick up a copy of this deck, where are we sitting on his budget?
We are, depending on where you're shopping, probably 130 to 150, which is under the 150 price point. Probably towards the lower end here at Pat's Games, where cards are excellently costed.
Absolutely.
That's been our take on casual vampire tokens. If you want to have your deck featured on Deck Doctors, you can write to us at deckdoctors@knightsatthegametable.com. That's Knights with an N. We are doctors, not knights. Dr. Morgan, thank you for joining us tonight.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Kevin. It was a blast.
Indeed, indeed. And to see more content from Knights at the Game Table, like our page on Facebook, subscribe down there to our YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time on Knights at the Game Table.